surfacing in many, many ways today. The homeless shelters are filled with numbers that were never dreamed of prior to Rudy Giuliani. People think he cleaned up the homeless. He drove them into shelters and into the outer boroughs. The purpose was to make the homeless invisible to the tourists and to commuters and to the midtown business interests. It was to make them invisible, never to reduce their numbers.
You can't sleep in the streets. They will have to go to a shelter, and we will require them to work in exchange for shelter. And boy, that might actually be good for them.
This man's answer was incarceration, was locking people up. We felt that we were the criminals. Every homeless person were under siege. Okay, if you was homeless, you were a dangerous element to society.
If you really study this administration, what comes through, or the rhetoric, is fundamentally they don't believe in government. Because when you make the case, it's cheaper to give someone a rental assistance subsidy than it is to put them in a shelter. It's 10 times cheaper. And you can make the economic argument, if no other human argument, and they still say, sorry, we don't want to do that. Because that's not, it's a program, it's a government. And that's the problem.
But, advocates go crazy in this situation, and they try to misconceive everything that you're doing. It's really not love. It's an inability to deal with your own guilt.
He brooks no dissent. And he uses the levers of power to punish any critic. He doesn't have that right. That's why the First Amendment is so important. That's why, thank God, we have courts, both federal and state. I mean, that's why I, on occasion, have referred to him as Pinochet or Caligula. Maybe it's a combination of the two.
This is an administration like we've never seen before that really does trample in a systemic way on people's right to dissent, especially people who are critical of the Giuliani administration. And as of this point, the Civil Liberties Union has done battle on 17 issues regarding First Amendment rights of expression and First Amendment rights of protest. For example, the Giuliani administration have taken the position that the sale of art on the streets of the city of New York is not an expressive activity. It's not protected by the First Amendment. As bizarre as that sounds, that's the argument they've been taking.
There have always been street artists in New York. And for many decades, there's been a steady population of full-time street artists in New York City. And for many years, street vending was the main form of retail selling. But since the mid-'80s, certain very powerful corporate business interests, so-called BIDs, or business improvement districts, have been lobbying the city government to completely eliminate vending, including First Amendment protected vendors, street artists, and book vendors. And when Giuliani was elected, they found a mayor and a police commissioner that were willing to do something that the city itself knew was illegal right from the start.
Our crime is for artists!
The police would just take every artist that they could grab, confiscate all their art, bring the artists to the precinct, book them. We became basically a hunted subculture within the city.
Displaying art. I have a right to display art. This is freedom.